Mount Everest. It is the tallest mountain on Earth, a jagged shard of rock and ice piercing the jet stream at 29,031 feet. To some, it is Chomolungma, the mother goddess of the world. To others, it is the ultimate symbol of human ambition, but to the hundreds of bodies currently resting on its slopes, it is something else entirely. It is a graveyard. Since the first successful ascent by Sir Edmund Hillary in Tenzing Norgay in 1953, over 300 people have perished on this mountain. Their bodies aren't buried. They are scattered across the peaks, frozen in time, preserved by a climate so hostile it halts the very process of decay. They remain exactly where they fell, dressed in bright down suits that have faded under decades of brutal ultraviolet light. But here is the unsettling truth that the brochures don't tell you. Most of these deaths do not happen randomly. They aren't bad luck or acts of God. They happen in specific, predictable locations, topographical traps that experienced climbers only speak of in hushed tone. These are places where the mountain seems almost alive, waiting for a single moment of weakness. Today on the Mega Brain Show, we are counting down the 5 deadliest points on Mount Everest. These are the specific zones responsible for more loss of life than anywhere else on the planet's ceiling. We will explore the physics of the death zone, the terrifying reality of high-altitude physiology, and the psychological breaking points that lead people to walk toward their own end. This isn't a list about glory. It's a list about reality. Take a deep breath while you still can, because once you start the climb, the mountain decides if you come back. We begin at number 5, Everest Base Camp. To the uninitiated, Base Camp sounds like a sanctuary, a place of hot soup, satellite phones, and safety. But this is the first great deception of the mountain. At 17,598 feet, Base Camp is already higher than almost any mountain in the continental United States or Europe. It is not the start of the danger. It is the beginning of the end for the human body. The primary threat here is invisible. At this altitude, the air contains only about 50% of the oxygen available at sea level. This triggers a biological cascade of failure. For many, Base Camp is where acute mountain sickness, or AMS, begins its slow burn. It starts with a crushing headache and nausea, but it can rapidly escalate into high-altitude pulmonary edema, where your lungs begin to fill with your own fluids, or cerebral edema, where the brain swells against the skull. People have gone to sleep in their tents at Base Camp feeling a little off and simply never woken up. But the danger isn't just internal. Base Camp sits directly beneath the massive, unstable hanging glaciers of the surrounding peaks. In 2015, a massive earthquake in Nepal sent a literal wall of ice and rock screaming down into the camp. Tents were flattened instantly. Climbers were buried in their sleep. It resulted in at least 22 deaths, the single deadliest day in the mountain's history. Base Camp is a place of psychological peril. It is where the excitement of the journey blinds you to the fact that you are already dying. As you leave the safety of Base Camp, you immediately enter number 4, the Khumbu Icefall. This isn't a trail, it's a moving river of ice flowing downhill at nearly 3 feet per day. Every single climber attempting the South Col route must pass through this gauntlet, and it is arguably the most terrifying technical challenge on Earth. The icefall is a labyrinth of bottomless crevasses and seracs towering blocks of ice the size of apartment buildings. Because the glacier is constantly moving, these towers can collapse at any second without a hint of warning. Climbers are forced to cross these gaps on aluminum ladders, lashed together with nylon rope, wearing crampons that clink against the metal as they stare down into a blue, infinite void. There is no safe time here. Climbers try to move before sunrise, hoping the freezing night temperatures keep the ice glued together, but the mountain doesn't follow a clock. In 2014, a massive ice block detached itself, killing 16 Sherpas instantly. There was no storm, no warning, just the mountain deciding to shift. Sherpas face the highest statistical risk here, crossing this death trap dozens of times per season to ferry gear for clients. It is a place where you don't climb with skill. You climb with a prayer that the ground doesn't swallow you whole. If you survive the icefall, you reach number 3. The Western WM, often called the Valley of Silence. It looks like a paradise, a wide, open basin of snow. There are no vertical cliffs here, no jagged ladders, and yet it is a silent killer. The Western WM acts as a giant solar oven. The surrounding walls of Everest, Lhotse, and Nuptse reflect the intense high-altitude sunlight back into the valley, trapping the heat. Temperatures can skyrocket to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, even as the air remains thin and oxygen-starved. Climbers, dressed in heavy down suits designed for 50 below zero, begin to cook from the inside out. They overheat, dehydrate, and suffer from snow blindness, so severe it feels like glass in the eyes. This is the slow kill zone. Many deaths here aren't dramatic falls. They are quiet disappearances. Someone sits down to rest in the heat, their heart gives out from the strain, and they simply drift away. It is the mountain's way of softening you up for what's next. At number 2, we reach the most infamous bottleneck in the world, the Hillary Step. Located at 28,839 feet, this was once a nearly vertical rock face that stood as the final guardian of the summit. But in recent years, it has become famous for something much more macabre: traffic jams in the death zone. Shutterstock above 8,000 meters, the human body cannot survive. There is so little oxygen that your cells begin to die. Your brain begins to prune its own functions to keep your heart beating. You are, quite literally, dying with every breath. And yet, because there is only one narrow path to the top, climbers are often forced to wait in a line for 2, 3, or even 4 hours at the Hillary Step. They stand still in 30 below zero winds, their supplemental oxygen tank slowly ticking toward empty. If the tank runs dry while you're standing in line, you have minutes before your brain shuts down. In the infamous 1996 disaster, and again in 2019, the crowding at the step turned a difficult climb into a mass casualty event. You are paralyzed by the people in front of you, unable to move up and unable to go down, while the mountain slowly drains your life force. Finally, we reach number 1. The summit and the descent. Reaching the top of the world is the dream, but reaching the top is only the halfway point. Statistically, the vast majority of Everest deaths happen on the way down. At 29,000 feet, the high is literal and metaphorical. Climbers reach the summit in a state of euphoria, but their bodies are spent. They have used up their reserve tank just to get there. When they turn around to head back, they find that the strength they need to navigate the descent simply isn't there. Their decision-making is clouded by hypoxia, a lack of oxygen to the prefrontal cortex. They make small, fatal mistakes. They clip a carabiner incorrectly. They sit down for just a 5-minute nap and never move again. This is where the most famous landmarks of Everest reside. Green Boots, a climber who died in 1996, remained in a limestone cave for nearly 2 decades, his neon boots serving as a grim waypoint for others. The Sleeping Beauty, Frances Arsentiev, who died after becoming separated from her husband. These aren't just stories. They are physical reminders that at this altitude, no rescue is coming. It is too high for helicopters and too dangerous for even the strongest Sherpas to carry a dead weight. If you fall here, you stay here. So, we have to ask the question, why? Why do they do it? Why do hundreds of people pay tens of thousands of dollars to risk their lives in these 5 deadly zones? It is because Everest represents the ultimate limit of the human experience. To stand where the sky turns black and the air ends is to see the world as few ever will. But Everest is not a playground. It does not care about your resume, your money, or your courage. It is a gargantuan mass of rock and ice that has been there for millions of years, and it will be there long after we are gone. It only waits. If you found this exploration of Everest's darkest corners fascinating, hit the subscribe button and join us for more deep dives into the extremes of our world. If you want to hear the specific, harrowing stories of the climbers who never came home, let us know in the comments. Because Everest has many more stories to tell, and as we've seen today, the most important part of the story isn't the climb up, it's the walk back down.